Jesus' crucifixion was during the third hour, or at 9 a.m. You see, Jesus had already gone through the beating throughout the night. He'd gone through these mock trials, these trumped-up charges against him. But by 9 o'clock in the morning, the Bible tells us in Mark 15:25 that it was the third hour when they crucified him. Now, they started their day at 6 a.m., so at 9 a.m. they crucified him. And then the time that the darkness came was at noon. It says at the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? The time that the light returned was 3 hours later at 3 p.m. So we've got 9 a.m., noon, 3 p.m. And the time he lived on the cross was for 6 hours. Notice that I put those words, lived. Because if you call that life, as he's hanging on the cross, we've got another way to look at it, is saying that he was dying on the cross. Our passage for today is going to be Mark 15:34 and 35. It talks about those 3 hours of darkness, because as we come to this point in our series, what I want to talk about is when Jesus said he was forsaken. At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land. Darkness came over the whole land. Now, I've got the room darkened in here, but there's not only some lights in the back, some lights in the front, some ambient light. But I want for you to imagine what it would have been like. For 3 hours, Jesus has already hung on the cross. He's already been there for 3 hours. He's already gone through the total humiliation of the cross. And everybody spitting on him and beating him and all the other kinds of things. And then they hung him upon the cross. And he hung there for 3 hours. And then it says about the 6th hour, 3 hours later after being there, darkness came over the whole land. Now, this was a darkness darker than anything you could ever imagine. Why was it so dark? People would not have city lights in that day. You didn't have the lights from the city. Nobody would have thought to bring a torch at noon. So when God caused the darkness to come upon the land, it was black. It was the darkest night that probably our world has ever known. So dark you couldn't see in front of you. And there Jesus hung for 3 more hours in the pitch black, without being able to see anything. Not even those who nailed his hands to the cross. And what's ironic about that is Jesus is known as the light of the world. It says in John 1 through 5, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him, all things were made. Without Him, nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Jesus was the light of the world, and yet the light of the world has just become darkened. Because we didn't understand who He was or what He had come to do. and our sins placed him upon that cross. And so he hung there in utter darkness, though he was the light of the world. And it says that about the 6th hour, the darkness came, and then for 3 hours more, at the 9th hour, the very last few minutes, if you will, of his life. See, most of what we've been talking about so far has led up to this, has been during the first part of the 6 hours that he hung upon the cross. The next, from 4, 5, 6, and 7, the next statements that he makes that we'll go over in the next 4 weeks, this week and the next 3 weeks. We're in the last few minutes or the last few seconds of his life. And here it says he cried out in a loud voice. And you have to imagine what it would have taken for him to cry out in a loud voice. His strength had already been sapped. Not only from having no sleep throughout the night, but from being beaten and bloodied so bad that they said that you could barely even tell that he was a man. And he, if you remember, as he fell under the weight of the cross, couldn't even carry his cross any longer. His strength was weakened. And then what happens when they hang somebody upon a cross is what it does is it basically cuts off your ability to breathe. Because your arms are hanging out above like this and you're slumped down. And the only way to catch a breath is to push up on the nail that's in your foot, in your feet, to be able to breathe. And so for him to be able to gasp enough air in and to yell out in a loud voice, it took all of his strength. Every bit that he had left within him. And he cried aloud to God. This was not the same cry that was the cry in the garden. You see, in the garden, the night before, he was praying and he was desperate, to hear from God. He was desperate to have an answer from him. It says, going a little farther, he fell to the ground and he prayed that if it was possible that hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. He called out to his daddy. God, I'll do it if you want me to. But if there's another way, let this pass from me. You see, he looked forward and saw that he was going to be separated from his father. And so when he took that last breath, when he yelled out, I want you to notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, Abba, Father. That was the first time that Jesus spoke of God in the sense of being God and not Father. Jesus always talked about my Father or Abba, Father. He talked about him in the term of a relationship. But here, in his total humanness, in the darkness of that which was around him, he said, my God, my God. And he screamed it out as loud as he could. This was not just reiterated scriptures, because Psalm 22 tells that this would be something that the Messiah would say as he hung upon the cross. It wasn't just reiterated scriptures. This was the cry of man. This was the first time these words have ever escaped his lips. But his father wasn't there. His father has turned his back on him. Not only because he didn't want to see his son go through the suffering, but because his father was a just